Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024. My next guest is someone who has had the courage for years to take on the syndicate, and she continues to this day. And it's to the betterment of every person in our country and, frankly, every person of the world. Helen Chaitman is a nationally recognized litigator with a diverse trial practice in the areas of lender liability, bankruptcy, bank fraud, RICO, professional malpractice, and trusts and estates. Among Helen Chaitman's achievements are the following. She was named one of the nation's top 10 litigators by the National Law Journal in the past. She authored the monthly newsletter, the Lender Liability Law Report, which is subscribed to by law firms and institutions throughout the United States. And she, along with Mr. Godhofer, began publishing their book, J.P. Madoff. This is must reading. You want to talk about taking on the syndicate. J.P. Madoff, the unholy alliance between America's biggest bank, that would be J.P. Morgan Chase, and America's biggest crook. The website, jpmadoff.com. Since early 2009, Helen Chaitman has been an outspoken advocate for investors in the Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, LLC. She lobbied in Congress on a pro bono basis for statutory changes to assure Madoff customers the protections of the Securities Investor Protection Act. And she has testified twice before congressional committees on issues affecting securities and investors. Again, the name of the website, jpmadoff.com. And the name of the book, J.P. Madoff, The Unholy Alliance Between America's Biggest Crook and America's Biggest Bank. It's my honor to welcome back my friend, Helen Chaitman. Helen, welcome back to the Operation Freedom platform.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dave.
Well, thank you for your perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice on behalf of every person in this country and the world, Helen, because I believe, Helen, if it were not for you and your efforts, as bad as things seem they are, I think they would be even worse. You know, Helen, I recently saw this brief report. First person I thought of was you. And then I thought, you know, if Helen was allowed to follow through, that she was blocked by the judicial branch, if she was allowed to follow through against, in particular, J.P. Morgan Chase, this little brief blurb and news item would be non-existent because the entity would have been cleaned up long ago. Here is the blurb. The Securities and Exchange Commission fined the securities unit of J.P. Morgan Chase, this was just in the past several weeks, $125 million for evading the ability of the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, to adequately conduct its investigations of the bank because there was firmware used by traders, supervisors, and other personnel of non-official communications devices to conduct its business, while the firm failed to record and retain these messages as required by law. Helen, you've taken on this entity, the banking syndicate, in particular JP Morgan Chase, for years, yet they keep being found guilty of these acts. They are fined what appears to be a big chunk of money, but in retrospect, it's a very small amount of money considering how many billions of dollars they're profiting from their illegal activities. And then, Helen, they just keep carrying on and nobody goes to jail. Am I off?
Well, it's not only that nobody goes to jail, it's that they get fined $135 million for concealing evidence of their violations of the law. In other words, they were forced to plead guilty to violating the federal RICO statute. Like Carlo Gambino violated the federal RICO statute. These people are gangsters, but they operate on Wall Street. And they were forced to plead guilty for manipulating the metals investment market and cheating other people who were in that same market. And the way it was proven was through their email. So now they're refusing to produce the emails to the SEC, which is responsible to monitor their conduct. Well, what does that tell you, what those emails have in them? Those emails have evidence of other crimes that JP Morgan Chase is committing. And $135 million doesn't compensate the victims of those crimes. That's why they're willing to pay it. And the government just plays along. The SEC says, oh, great, we have $135 million, and doesn't think about the millions of people who are paying more for their products that they need in their lifetimes because JP Morgan Chase is cheating everybody.
And Helen, is it an overstatement by me when I say that the reason why JP Morgan gets away with this criminal activity that you or myself or any law-abiding citizen would never be allowed to get away with, the reason why they're getting away with it is because their partners in crime in which they're complicit with is our own federal government. Am I off on that?
No, it's everybody in Congress. It's everybody in the House of Representatives and the Senate. These people are paid to look the other way. And the problem is that JP Morgan Chase has all the money, and of course, they don't mind bribing people with it. But the victims are all your listeners because they're paying higher prices for things than they should because of JP Morgan Chase's manipulating of the market. And this is a crime. They have been found guilty of violating the RICO statute. Now, of course, when the people who violate the RICO statute are JP Morgan Chase employees, they don't even get fired. They don't get fined. They don't get fired. They just get promoted. But if your listeners violated a crime, they would be put in prison for it. And yet they're the victims of this massive series of crimes being perpetrated by the major banks in the United States. It's shocking. And yet it's very difficult to do anything about it. You need a courageous president who has an attorney general who's willing to enforce the law no matter how much money people are willing to bribe him not to do it.
So right now we have Biden and his attorney general, Merrick Garland. They obviously have no interest in doing that, correct?
We haven't had a president who was interested in doing it.
Well,
Obama,
and that's my point. It doesn't matter who's there, right, Helen? Whether it's Biden and Garland or Trump and Barr or Obama and Holder or whoever, right?
That's exactly right, because both parties, the leaders of both parties, are willing to accept bribes in order to allow conduct of which the target is the average American. Nobody cares if the average American is overcharged for insurance, is overcharged on their loans, because the average American doesn't have the financial clout to impress anyone in Congress. JP Morgan Chase, because it's stolen so much money from Americans, it has enough money to bribe everyone in Washington.
So, Helen, educate our listeners again, because this is really a great case study. When you had the goods on J.P. Morgan Chase, right, and their collusion with Bernie Madoff in this entire money laundering ripoff operation, you took that to the courts. and educate our listeners. When you first went to the district court level and said, I have their own documents that say that they are, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but you had their own documents, JP Morgan Chase, of how they were complicit in this crime with Madoff. What did the federal district court say to you?
Well, not only did I have the documents proving it, but I had JP Morgan Chase, when it was indicted by the federal government, they entered into a settlement, of course. JP Morgan Chase paid $2 billion. Nobody went to jail. Nobody lost their job. Nobody lost their Christmas bonuses. But JP Morgan Chase swore that it wouldn't deny any of the facts to which it agreed in the document evidencing the settlement. So I took the document evidencing the settlement. I took those allegations which JP Morgan Chase agreed to, and I put them in a complaint. And the judge threw it out, saying it's not credible, ignoring the fact that these were facts to which JP Morgan Chase not only agreed, but agreed that if it denied them, it would be subject to criminal prosecution. Didn't make any difference. The judge, in his worldview, JP Morgan Chase couldn't commit a crime. And therefore, the fact that he was faced with irrefutable admissions of a crime made no difference. That's the problem that we have. If you have a big enough fraud, our jails have plenty of room for 16-year-old kids who, take $30 from a 7-Eleven.
Right.
But when it comes to someone who takes $30 billion,
no.
We don't have room for those people.
Oh, it's overcrowded. Yeah. Well, then, and Helen, so you had the smoking guns, not just guns on these guys. Well, then people say, well, Helen should have taken it to the appeals court. Well, you did. And what did they say?
The appeals court found some other reason why. Nothing substantive, just a nonsensical procedural reason why they threw it out. And then the Supreme Court didn't take review of the case because the Supreme Court only takes cases. There are very few kinds of cases that they have to take. Most cases they take because they're interested in them. And the Supreme Court isn't interested in criminal bankers. That's why we have so many of them.
Well, Helen, I'm gonna say something right now. Supreme Court, since we brought this up here, there are some things you do in life that you wish you didn't do. Okay, Helen. And one of the things I'm glad I did, and you and I have talked about this, several years ago, I got called for jury duty. And I ended up getting put on a jury. And actually, Helen, and we've discussed this before, I actually found it beyond interesting. I actually found it to be a very positive experience. It was in downtown Detroit. It was a weapons charge. And it was not, this is a pretty dirty thing, right? This was not like a, white collar crime kind of thing. I found it, it actually gave me faith actually in the system after having sat on a jury and gone through the whole deliberative process, and the trial went on for, a week, and it was okay. Helen, so I was glad I did that. Okay. But Helen, on Friday, I did something that I wish I hadn't in retrospect. This past Friday, I went online and I listened to the live Supreme Court hearing on the mandate issue. Helen, let me ask you this. As one of the top litigators in this country, if you have, let's say you're in front of appeals court, so there's 3 judges, let's say, as opposed to 9 of these. Well, there were 8, and Sotomayor was held up in her office somewhere, I guess. I don't know. But if you're in a courtroom and you're litigating a case and judges start saying things that are factually incorrect, Helen, what do you do?
Well, you try to bring it to the court's attention, but the fact is that 90% of judges approach any issue with a preconceived worldview, which dictates the result in that case. So they're not particularly interested in what the facts are. They're only interested in spinning their view of the world. And that's really why I love jurors, because just as you sat on that jury and you did what you believe to be the right thing, no bias, no prejudice, no preconceived ideas, you don't get that from judges. You get it from jurors. And the jury system is what saves the whole justice system in this country, because if we had to rely on judges, you wouldn't have dispensation of the law. But the jurors come to do the right thing. They're not paid to do it. They're not paid off to do it. They just want to do the right thing, just the way you did. So what saves us is the jury system. But the unfortunate thing is that there's the percentage of cases that actually go to jury trial is very, very small.
Yeah, you're right. So the problem with, you're right. I mean, this whole goat rodeo, and it's being kind of called a goat rodeo on Friday, no matter where anybody is on this whole issue, the facts have to be facts and not made up things that were just completely off the charts, okay? But my concern was, when all this was happening, is the attorneys on either side, when things were being said that were factually incorrect. I mean, Helen, not even in the ballpark of somewhere near, this was beyond cognitive dissonance that was occurring. Nobody said anything, right? So I frankly, I was not very pleased, because my concern is if a group of people, because when you got 9 judges, I don't know if this ever happens, but if I'm one of those other judges and I start hearing stuff, I would at least say, no matter what other judge is spouting this stuff, could you please cite me the document that came from, that statistic? Because I've never heard that before. But they didn't even do it, right? And if the foundation is so bogus for what's being laid in the courtroom, how in the world can anyone expect a decision that has any semblance related to reality if the information that's going unchallenged, whether it's out of the mouth of an attorney or out of a judge, how do we have any semblance that the decision will actually reflect what's truly reality?
We don't. You're left up to the quality of the judges. If the judges are not of intellectual quality, and they're not, interested in being honest about the facts, you're going to get garbage from them.
So then this right in your neck of the woods in New York, we just went through this Ghislaine Maxwell trial, right? Now, yeah. This is one aspect I want to discuss with you, Helen, because when I was a juror, they ask you all these questions ahead of time, right? That you have to honestly answer, okay? And I was very honest with them. I said, I host a radio talk show. It makes everybody mad because I put the truth on the table, and that upsets everybody, right? Now, I didn't do that to get thrown off a jury. I did that because I felt I had to be honest, right? Well, now we find out in this Ghislaine Maxwell hearing, where there was a jury, that several of the jurors did not disclose something that's really important, that they had been abused as children, and now they're using that as I get it, but as a mistrial on this. Helen, whose fault is that? I mean, I would think both of the attorneys, that would have been one of the first questions out of their mouths when they were looking at jurors about, have you ever been abused as a child or a teenager or somewhere in your life sexually? Am I off on that?
That, as I understand the news reports, that was one of the questions in the jury questionnaire. And the defense of the one person that I read was that he didn't deliberately answer it negatively. He just read it very quickly. Now, the problem is that you have a certain number of what are called peremptory challenges. You don't have to give a reason why you're disqualifying someone. But when you have someone who, for example, was the victim of sexual abuse, the judge might have said, you know what, I'm going to excuse you. That could have been, because you could certainly understand that person might be more likely than someone else to find that there had been sexual abuse.
Correct.
So that's really the issue. It isn't automatic grounds for disqualification, because a lot of people have experienced sexual abuse. And also, if you just look at trials, let's say the trial is whether someone ran a red light. Well, everybody's had that experience, but it doesn't disqualify you from being on the jury. So I don't know which way that's going to come out. But, it's certainly not good for the legal system. It's not good for the legal system to have to retry a case like that. And it's certainly not good for the legal system to have a verdict come in, which then is subject to legitimate question.
And the other question I have on this trial, Helen, I want your impression on this, because you had to deal with Madoff and the whole situation, and you went out front and said, wait a minute, it's not just Madoff that's involved in this. There's a bank behind this guy that was working with him. Headline, this from the Times from the United Kingdom. Ghislaine Maxwell's little black book to remain secret in court deal. The Department of Justice and Defense in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell have agreed that her little black book of contacts will never be made public, even though the jury was allowed just to see part of it. Judge Allison Nathan ruled in Manhattan Federal Court that only a limited amount of material from the socialites' contact books would be released under seal. Now, Helen, there were people, young women, who were abused. Why are we protecting the men and or adult men and adult women who abuse these kids by concealing this evidence?
I agree with you. It doesn't make sense.
And again, it makes the whole system look corrupt. Helen, how can folks follow you? Because they need to follow you, because you give tremendous insight into what's really happening in the legal system.
Well, they can email me, hchaitman at chaitmanllp.com, and it's spelled Chaitman. I'd love to talk to any of your listeners at any time. And they can follow Pam Martins. I know you've been following her.
Oh, she's great. They're great. Russ and Pam.